It was sunset, and the sky was red. Two people stood in the middle of a quiet battlefield. One of them, a blonde-haired hero named Hayden Reich, was on his knees. He was badly hurt and bleeding. His sword had fallen, and he looked weak. The other person, a silver-haired man named Julian Crifford, walked toward Hayden. Julian looked calm and had no emotion on his face. Julian cleaned his sword with a piece of cloth as he said that even heroes bleed when their power is gone. Hayden, feeling betrayed, asked Julian why he was doing all of this. Julian said Hayden should have treated him better as he was supporting him as a hero, and now it was too late. Hayden asked if Julian would really kill him, even though he was his teacher. Julian said yes. Julian swung his sword and took down Hayden with a single strike. The scene changed. Now, our boy, a black-haired gamer named Lee Saho, was staring at his computer screen. He looked shocked and angry. He couldn't believe what he saw. Hayden, his favorite character, had just been killed by Julian, someone who used to be his student. He was sweating while looking at his computer screen. On the screen, it was shown that his pre-order was in progress. Our boy thinks about how Hayden was the hero of the Northern Front Line who led everyone even in his desperate situation, and how he was a mastermind when it comes to hunting demons down. He was literally the protagonist of the game. Our boy grit his teeth in anger while thinking that how could the protagonist just die like that? Our boy had played the game Kill the Demon King for years. Hayden was the main character, the smartest and strongest hero in the game. It made no sense for him to die like that. A blue window pops up on the screen displaying his pre-order of Kill the Demon King as he thinks to himself that he had so much hope for the sequel, and they betrayed him in the worst possible way by killing his favorite character. Our boy opened his game stats. He was ranked number 1, had spent 38 million won, and played for tens of thousands of hours. He was angry that Julian, the silver-haired villain, had now become the main character. He saw people online talking about it too. Some were mad like him, like saying things that it seems that Julian's the main protagonist this season. Others thought Julian looked cool. Some said villains were interesting. Our boy decided to cancel his pre-order for the next game. He clicked the cancel button, then threw his game stuff into the trash. Then he laid on his bed feeling sad and cursed the game how trash it became. But deep inside, he was sad. But at the same time, our boy thinks that no other game has graphics as good as Kill the Demon King, and how that game helped him when he thought that his reality was completely destroyed by his job. The game was like an escape from reality for him, but now it's over. He looked at a small flower near his window. He sits and starts watering his orchard plants while shading his game. Like how old people love to grow orchards because they don't grow up to become like any stupid game that disappoints them. Suddenly, an email popped up on his screen. It was from the game company. They asked if he canceled because of the story. Our boy didn't care as he thought that this might be because they didn't want to give them a refund. He clicked the link. Then, another window appears saying, "Change the story yourself." Without thinking, our boy clicked again. The screen became super bright. Our boy woke up lying on hard, dry ground like some kind of a wasteland. The sky was orange. He looked around and realized this was the battlefield from the game. It was the same place where Julian had killed Hayden. Before he could understand what was going on, a big scorpion monster appeared. The monster ran at him. Our boy moved quickly, dodging the attack. Our boy suddenly realizes that this is the Scorpion King from the game that he spent thousands of hours playing. It looked scary, with huge claws, sharp legs, and red eyes. Then, a window popped up in front of him. It said he had new traits, great sword skills, and the ability to sense monster weaknesses. The monster attacks, but our boy resists his claw with his one hand, looking frightened. Suddenly, he raises his hand and punches him, and the Scorpio falls to the ground. He was surprised that he possessed this much strength. Then a light appears around his body. The blue screen appeared again. Then he realizes what is actually happening. It's character possession. The Scorpion King rises to attack him, but our boy starts running. Then he noticed a sword on his back. He grabbed it without thinking. The sword felt just like the one Hayden used in the game. He thinks that the character he has possessed is Hayden, which he spends thousands of hours playing. Our boy attacked the scorpion. A bright blue line of energy came from the sword. With a single strike, our boy takes down the monster. Breathing hard, our boy looked at the sword and smiled. This was definitely Hayden's power. He thought he had become Hayden as he thinks that he might be able to change the story and might be able to save Hayden from dying. But then another window appeared. It said he had unlocked a skill called Crescent Slash. That didn't make sense. Hayden never had that move. Feeling nervous, our boy pulled down his hood and looked at his reflection in the blade. He saw red eyes, silver hair, and a cold face. All these facial features were Hayden's. A final window appeared. It said his name was Julian Crifford, the Demon King's helper, the traitor. Our boy is shocked to see that. He wasn't Hayden. He was inside Julian's body, the villain. The scene shifted to a huge castle. Inside a decorated room, our boy was looking at himself in the mirror. A thought hit his mind. A traitor and an evil guy who deceived his own master. This is him, Julian Crifford. Our boy raises his hands to pull at the corner of his eyes and try to widen it. But they weren't open more than their usual. All of this wasn't even his primary concern. How the hell did he end up in this world as Julian Crifford? It's been a week ever since he started living his life as Julian. He had tried everything he could to return to his world, like shaking the status window, shouting at the sky hoping someone would reply and send him back, or searching for any instruments that could send him back, but all of these things failed. Thinking about all of this, our boy let out a heavy sigh. Then he shifted his gaze to the window in front of him and looked at his special trait, which was to speak formally. Speak with respect in all languages. This annoyed Julian because he had to act respectfully and formally even when he was talking to himself. Despite all of this, he couldn't help but smile because at least he looked pretty handsome. He understands why his character is so popular. Julian admired his own reflection in the mirror. Meanwhile, a young nervous man was trembling as he approached Julian. He has brown hair. He gathered up all the courage and opened the door. Suddenly he announces, "Sir Haran is here." Haran is a direct descendant of the Cryart family. He wonders what he's doing here. As Julian gave him a stare, Haran got frightened, wondering why Julian looked so scary and angry. He asks Julian if he's okay. Our boy confirms to him that he's fine and thanks him for his concern. Hearing this, Haran lets out an uneasy laugh and thinks that it was foolish of him to assume that Julian would collapse. Our boy, calmness and coolness remained unchanged as he laughed, but in his mind, he kept thinking what Haran was up to and why he came here in such an unexpected way. He isn't some random guy to check on me. Meanwhile, Haran, on the other hand, was thinking how Julian could be so calm and relaxed about his visit. It didn't seem normal to him at all. He thought that maybe he should rattle him a little bit. Haran smirked and spoke in a casual tone. "Julian, I heard a rumor that you've lost your memory." Our boy gets shocked hearing this. But quickly he connected all the dots while resting his hand on his chin. Maybe that was the reason everyone was calling him when he was acting strangely to get to his real universe. That might have seemed suspicious to others. Our boy's gesture suddenly got noticed by Haran. He wondered if he must have got it right. Haran says, "It's just a rumor." Hearing Haran, our boy's gestures suddenly shifted, seeming more dangerous than ever. Then he asks Haran, "Do you believe in this rumor too?" At that moment, Haran got more terrified and scared. It got him sweating again. "There's no way I would," he says. Haran thinks to himself, why did he ask? It also got him thinking that maybe Julian knows that he has arrived under the Noble Elders Association order. Haran takes a deep breath and tries to convince Julian that there's no need to believe any of those rumors circulating among maids at all. And there's no need to take it seriously as well. Then Haran tells Julian the real reason he has arrived, which was that the Elder Association had a message for him, and they told Haran to deliver it. Upon hearing the name of the Elder Association, Julian recognized the weight behind them. It was created by the nobles. They have always regarded bloodlines as very important. Those who place importance on lineage. Julian is a collateral family member. He is an excellent swordsman and a magician. The organization has always viewed him as a thorn and wants to get rid of him quickly. A message from them. Julian's mind raced, and he thought that he should be careful. Our boy asks Haran about the message. Haran hesitates a bit, then says that Julian needs to participate in the Shut-Eye entrance test as an instructor. Julian thinks about it. Shut-Eye is a very important group that secretly does all the missions inside the palace but acts as guards. They are an organization where people with incredible martial forces gather. Julian is also a part of the Shut-Eye, and people who look down upon him choose him, which seems suspicious to him, and he wonders if he should listen to their request in the first place. Haran smiles as he thinks that normally Julian is able to recognize his Elder Association tricks and try to avoid them. He starts thinking about how to convince him. Before he could formulate a strategy, our boy responded yes, that he would go as a supervisor. Haran is stunned and confused to hear this. His eyes widened in disbelief. He tells him that his injury is too much for him to participate in, but Julian tells him that it's about to be healed as he removes the bandage off his head. Haran panics because he realizes that Julian is serious. The speed by which Julian accepted the offer was beyond suspicious for Haran. He wanted to curry some favor. As Haran starts to leave because he has no idea what Julian is going to do after this, Julian stops him. His tone sent a shiver down Haran's spine. Haran turned around to say something, but before he could say a word, Julian handed an orchid pot to him with a cheerful grin and looked at him with evil as hell. Haran leaves the room, feeling defeated. Even his legs started shaking to the point where he fell on his knees due to panic and thinking about the nickname of Julian, who was a smiling executioner. On the other hand, Haran inside his room thinks that he has dealt with one of them as his room is full of orchids and now he's trying to get rid of all of them. Then he thinks to himself that someone might be waiting for him, so he needs to prepare. He grabs his blade and says that as he's Julian now, so he should not act stupid because Julian would keep a blade with him. He opens his closet and says that Julian's style of clothes is crazy and he hates it, but he has to get dressed perfectly so that he won't draw any attention. So he grabs a white coat. He opened the door and told Haran that he was ready and couldn't wait to get to the interview. They went on a carriage. Haran tells Julian that the enrollment tests for Shut Eye will be carried on training grounds of Vale Academy. Julian thinks about how Vale Academy wasn't a significant place in the game, but he still remembers. After a brief moment, our boy asks Haran about the Vale Academy, which catches Haran off guard because he thought that Julian was already familiar with that place since he is from that academy. Our boy's mind went blank for a moment, and to cover up his mistake, he said that he wasn't aware of that fact as it's been really long and he's sure that it has changed a lot in these years. Haran says that a visit to the academy might be a bad place to visit. What if someone from that time finds Julian? The carriage comes to a stop. The carriage driver tells both Julian and Haran that they have finally reached the Vile Academy. Julian looks outside at the beautiful building of Vile Academy. Julian says that this academy is surely larger in real life than it was in game. Haran asks him what he just said. Our boy covers up by saying that even the graphics of the anime can't beat the beauty of Vile Academy. Haran looks at him suspiciously. Haran wonders how scary Julian really is and how he is scheming to be like it. Julian gave a look to Haran, who was sweating. Julian wondered, isn't he too afraid? I kind of feel bad. Julian says that he can leave if he wants to and also thanked him for escorting him to the Vile Academy. Haran says that he will be here as he wants to see how the tests would run. Julian looks him dead in the eye as he thinks that Haran wants to get out of this place. Julian also sees an ominous aura over Haran's head. He was also kind of shaking and seemed terrified. At first, Julian thought that maybe it's mana, but it can't be Haran's mana. Maybe it's an emotion, or maybe it's fear itself. Haran asks Julian why he keeps looking at him in the strangest way. Julian opens up his status window that says that he is sensitive to negative emotions that are directed towards him, and he is able to judge emotion by the color of negative emotions aura. Haran's wonder why Julian is pointing towards him like he did something wrong. Now that Julian thinks about the fact that this character has always been pro at knowing other people's emotions in the game too. He was also really good at utilizing other people's fear. He was able to win a fight without having a proper fight because of this ability. He also uses anger so that his opponent would make more mistakes than they usually ever will. Everything made sense to him now. With this realization, Julian turns back to Haran and analyzes him fully and thinks maybe Haran isn't leaving him due to his ability. Maybe he is scared, so he's sticking around to keep an eye on me. Maybe the Elders Association ordered him to keep an eye on our boy. Our boy gets lost in his thoughts as he tries to guess what the Elders Association wants to do as they consider him a thorn in their side. Julian thought that his character was very infamous in the game, so it makes sense that the Elders Association wants to get rid of him. So they started to spread rumors against him like he has lost his memory to get rid of him, as this might be the perfect time for the Elders Association to get rid of our boy. And of course, Julian won't let this happen at all. He needs to survive all of this chaos and make his way to his world. He starts thinking about his next move. Someone bumps into him and apologizes. When that stranger opens his eye, he sees Julian staring and smiling at him. And since he has a villain face, the stranger falls to the ground and starts screaming in panic and says, "Julian." His outburst quickly drew the attention of all the other students standing there. As soon as they spotted Julian, they started to panic even more that why the crazed dog of the royal family is here. They all starts assuming that the stranger who bumped into Julian is done as he has made the biggest mistake of his life. Even Julian hasn't done anything yet. Not only the students were having these thoughts, Haran was also panicking. He rushed forward and pleaded with Julian to leave the stranger as he's just a student. Julian makes a fist. In the mind, our boy thinks that he hates Julian too as he killed his favorite character in the game. Everyone around him has intense fear of him as he is Julian now. How is he supposed to get angry at this point? He just wished that Julian could have been a lot more nicer or treated people in a better way so that the people surrounding him wouldn't look at him with fear. Suddenly, a girl with long, beautiful black hair wearing high heels arrived. She stands in front of Julian. Julian recognized her as a woman named Eileen Donachian, as she's one of the main characters in the name Kill the Demon King. She is an instructor in the Vile Academy who is affiliated with the Adrathan Empire's Mage Tower. She is a very strong and intelligent magician who can even handle the metal element of the 5 elements. She is 5th tier at the age of 24. Julian suddenly recalls her from the game. She even gives Hayden tons of valuable advice in the game. Our boy wonders why Eileen has arrived here to greet him. Like, do Julian and Eileen know each other by any means? Julian, something unusual caught his attention. A strange aura was surrounding Eileen. He wonders whether it's fear or anger. Then he notices that it isn't fear or anger at all. It's resentment. He wonders what Julian has done that has made her angry. As Eileen is a really strong magician, he shouldn't do anything that might find her suspicious. He thinks that he should come up with an idea to handle the entire situation quickly, and he asks who gives halflings such as her permission to talk to him. The words turn Eileen's face ice cold. The atmosphere surrounding it dropped several degrees. Julian starts crying internally. He curses himself as all of this problem is caused because he's Julian. He reaches for his blades and asks her if being halfling also means that she only has half of her hearing. So he decides to lean into the role of the villain. Then he taunts again, asking if she knows what kind of noise a person makes when they die. Julian steps forwards as he laughs internally, saying she must be scared and he can calm her down. His villainous smile only widens. But then suddenly, Eileen gave an opposite reaction as she released her yellow mana. A strange yellow energy erupts from her body. She warns him by saying that this isn't a way one should act in front of professors and students, as it's an act of violence against an entirely vile academy, which isn't allowed at all, and she won't forgive him for it. This terrified Julian. Then Eileen tells our boy to prepare himself, as she's going to attack him, and she won't be an easy opponent for him. Julian knew that he would lose in the fight, so to back out of it. He made an excuse that he was just trying to back out after scaring her as a villain. But Eileen didn't listen. Lighting gathers in both of her palms, and she fires a powerful blast at him. Our boy's sword was already raised across his chest as the lightning strike, which deflected the attack. The ground trembles. He starts to wonder if they are actually fighting now. Eileen narrowed her eyes and got angry as Julian was looking away in the middle of the fight. Eileen looked back at all the students and ordered them to stay away from the fight as it can harm them. All the students trembled and they quickly ran away from the ground for the sake of their own safety. Haran starts wondering what is going on. He regrets that he should have listened to Julian when he ordered him to leave this place. As Eileen was distracted by the students, Julian took advantage of this opportunity and said that she should not look away from him as he raises his sword. Eileen used her magic as a barrier, but it only lasted a few seconds. Eileen gets embarrassed and ashamed. She suddenly sticks her hands out and strikes another lightning bolt towards Julian. But he blurred in and out seeing her attack and tried to dodge it and leap back into the distance. Julian thinks that those attacks were really dangerous and effective, as if she was putting her emotions into it. Regrets ran across Eileen's mind as she didn't think that her attacks would be this much fatal, as Julian was able to dodge and ran away from each of her attacks, which she didn't expect at all. At one point in her life, Eileen thought of Julian as an ideal noble. She also admits that he played his role perfectly. That thought sent her back into a memory when she was still a student at the Vale Academy, and all the girls were impressed by him, and they used to fawn over him, saying that he's more charming than any of the other nobles. Even Eileen, who was just a freshman student back then, was also taken away by his look. She used to think of him as a super cool student. Not only did he have a lot of connections, but he was also regarded as a rising star of the Empire with his swordsmanship. She tightened the grip on her book and says that whenever she looks at him, she gets hope that the fact she from a collateral line won't hold her back. Back then, she couldn't tell apart respect from love as she handed him a love letter. Her hands were shaking. She put so much feeling into it, but in the end, she got rejected. That's a stupid memory of hers that slips through her mind every day. Reminiscing through all those memories, she charges up a huge lightning palm between her hands to hit Julian. He steps side again. It would have hurt him real bad if he hadn't. This really frustrates Eileen as she has missed another shot. Our boy wonders why Eileen's face is so red and full of anger. He thinks that maybe he should wrap all this mess quickly. Our boy moved like a gust of wind in an instant, and when Eileen turns, it's too late. Before she could even turn back, he hit her in the back of her head with the hilt of his sword and said that they should stop playing around. Eileen cries as she asks him what he is doing and why he is looking down upon her. He could have killed her if he wanted to by using his Moon Knight sword when he knew the opening. She felt enough mana radiating from his body, so still he didn't kill her. He smiles and says that she really wants to know. She mistakes him and immediately gets the thought that maybe he has acknowledged her feelings. She even starts to blush. Julian simply shrugged and then pointed at Haran, who has been lingering in the background because this is Haran's first time here. He had no idea where the testing grounds were, and everyone else was too scared of him to tell him. Julian says to Eileen as she knows the truth now, so she should be leading him now as she's a halfling. Haran wonders that Julian could have said all of this stuff about him with a little bit more respect. Eileen internally gets really angry, then went forward to say, "Was this really your reason?" As our boy starts moving in the opposite direction from Eileen, he says that Moon Knight's sword is really special to Julian in the game, and Eileen must be referring. Normally, when a sword is covered with an aura which is visible in the form of lightning surrounding the sword. However, this sword seemed really powerful for Julian to him. The sword itself turns into a bluish color, making it seem as if it's holding moonlight within itself. Julian used the sword to kill multiple demons. After other people witnessed it, they started giving it the title of Monk Knight sword out of respect and fear. This sword is the identity and source of Julian's power. While thinking about all of this, he wonders how he is able to wield such a powerful sword into his hand. It's a sign that Eileen must have started catching on. He starts sweating as it can be really bad for him, so he must do something so that she couldn't find out the truth. Haran wonders what he is scheming now. Elaine turns around and asks Eileen and Haran if something is wrong. They both started panicking and said that it's nothing. Then they lead him to the training ground. Julian opens up the door and asks if everyone is doing fine. He also apologizes for being a little late and blames Professor Eileen. Then he introduces himself as Julian Cryhart Plasson and says that he will be conducting their Shut Eyes exam. He says that everyone in the crowd must have heard about him before, as he's very infamous. As he looks among the students, he sees a familiar face from the game. He was the second son of the Torso family. He kinda knew that he would show up. The Torso family have been friends with the Cryhart family for a very long time. It's generally deemed a high honor to be associated with Shut Eyes, which is an organization directly affiliated with the Imperial family, which means that it is like getting in is really tough and competitive. The entrance exam is a battle between an instructor and an applicant, and during the process, Julian brings the second son of Torso family to dishonor the defeat. The Elder Association would see this as a best opportunity. This is the part where Julian's infamy might end. He announces loudly that it seems that everyone there is willing to enter the Shut-Eye exam. Then he goes on to poke fun at them by saying that they have very naive eyes and an easy upbringing. He says that even the ornaments of their sword makes him laugh. Then he announces that Shut-Eye is the roughest place in the Empire. He further says that as a senior he would give them a task to complete the task, and the challenge is to kill him. All the students get shocked hearing this. Julian was starting to feel the pressure. He started sweating. Now that he has announced that they have to kill him, he just realized that the entrance exam is a duel. Haran warned him that Julian should not underestimate the students as they won't go easy on him at all. He was in tension internally about how to fight all these students. Even in his fight with Eileen, he was just dodging or running away from all of her attacks. If he were to participate in a real battle, it might turn out really bad as people will find out that he's really weak. And since he's not using the Moon Knight sword, they would think that it was just a rumor and it didn't exist in reality. They will all start believing the rumors that he has lost his memory. This is all he could think of right now. The other students were watching him closely, and he couldn't tell if they were scared or suspicious, but it wasn't just the students. Eileen was a big problem too. If he acted weird around her, she might think he was dangerous. And if she attacked him, he might not survive. That's why Julian knew he had to act fast. Instead of playing it safe, he did the opposite. He shouted at everyone, taunting them and asking them what's wrong. He told them the only way this would end was if he died or no more applicants are left. The other kids froze. One of them raised his hand and said that he quit. All of a sudden, a lot of other students gave up too. The kid from the torso family realized that this is bad and grit his teeth. Haran notices that all of them quitted. Julian smirked and covered his mouth, laughing quietly to himself. He walked past Eileen and Horned, proud of his win. Well, that's the end of the exam. No one left to compete, he said confidently. Inside, he was thrilled. He'd pulled it off. He knew that when things got hard, his more ruthless side would help him out. He wonders what Eileen would think of him. Will the fear of him overcome her hatred towards him? But something about Eileen's reaction stopped him. She wasn't angry. In fact, her face looked calm, peaceful even. Not what he expected at all. He wonders what happened. Maybe his skill isn't working, or maybe it's even possible for Straight to stop showing. Eileen just bit her lip as it reminded her of something from the past, like when Julian avoided unnecessary fights by intimidating his opponents. He doesn't understand that he can only see negative emotions, and not the positive ones. Back at the shut-eye, Haran starts calling Julian by getting in front of him and tells him he has done a very good job. But Julian seems to be having different thoughts. All of a sudden, Julian thanked him and said he is the one who did the hard work, not him. He was just double-checking to see whether skill works or not. A student comes forward. Julian asks him who he is. Then he goes on and introduces himself by saying that he is Razlet, and he is in charge of administrative tasks for Shut-Eyes. Then he says to Julian that the rumors about him of losing his memory are false after all, as he finished the fight without having any fights. Our boy wonders when will this boy stop talking. He says that even knowing that there's a member of the Torso family didn't stop him from not going easy on them. But Haran got angry. How dare you act so full of yourself when you're just a trainee, he snapped. He even brought up the bad blood between the Torso family and Julian's family. Julian sighed and told Haran he was looking at it all wrong. Shut-Eyes don't accept nobles, and since it is directly affiliated with Imperial family, only commoners and nobles can join. Haran asks him if he's the noble. Julian then clears that he's a halfling of the Cryheart family. The second son of the Torso family took the entrance exam, despite being aware that he wouldn't get past the second screening round. Maybe the Torso family is trying to teach their son through experience, or maybe there's some scheming involved in the entrance exam. Haran started trembling. You knew this was a trap, and I was affiliated with the Elders Association, and you still let me come with you? He looked shocked and betrayed. Julian tried to calm him down. No, it's probably just a misunderstanding, he said. But deep down, he wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe there was a plan. Maybe he was part of it, and he'd just been lucky no one had caught on yet. Then our boy went home. All the maids greeted him. They ask if he will be having dinner, but he turns down the offer, also warning them to not let anyone into his office. He went to his office and closed the door and took a big sigh. He put the sword to his table. He reminisced about Haran and how the Elder Association really did scheme something for this entrance exam. He thought that he was lucky enough not to get caught by anyone. But how long would that luck last? He looked down at his sword and frowned. The fact that he hadn't been able to use the moonlight sword, it scared him. What if someone from the association noticed? What if they realized the truth and kicked him out of the family? Julian wasn't sure how much longer he could keep hiding. He picks up the sword and starts analyzing it. Julian reached behind him and wrapped his fingers around the hilt of the sword. The moment his hand touched it, something shifted. It was as if time slowed down. The sword's path, the way it moved, the weight it carried, the air it cut through, became crystal clear in his mind. Almost like he could see its trajectory glowing in front of him before he even swung it. A blue screen appeared before his eyes. His stats flickered into view, and one thing stood out immediately: the exceptional swordsman trait. According to the screen, this ability meant that he had been capable of wielding a sword since birth. Any weapon shaped like a sword, no matter the size, type, or style, he could master. But even with this incredible skill, Julian knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. He still couldn't fully control the moonlight sword, the legendary weapon he had seen only a few times in the game. It wasn't just about skill. There were others in the Empire who were just as talented. Some were even more polished in swordsmanship. The real Julian, the one he had taken over, was one of the very best. And there were dozens more like him. There is an overwhelming disparity in skills when it comes to aura or mana use. This is the only way he can live in a pathological way. So if Julian wanted to survive, If he wanted to prove that he deserved to be here, he had to do something more, something greater. He took a breath and focused. If the rules of mana in this world were the same as in the game, and so far, everything pointed to that being true, then he knew what he had to do next. He closed his eyes and began to concentrate. In the game, mana didn't just float around randomly. It had a system, a structure. There were meridians in the body, channels where mana flowed, and there were exactly 38 of them. Out of those, 6 were known as the Great Veins. And the most important one, the one in the head, the heart vein, as it was called, linked directly to the center of a person's power. He whispered to himself, I need to guide the mana stored in my heart and send it up, all the way to the moonlight meridian. But then, something clicked. He felt it. A faint glow began to rise from within. Then, our boy thinks to himself that he needs to relocate the mana within his body to another area. As our boy attempts this, he finds the resistance much greater than he expected. However, Julian possesses the ability to overcome it. Soon, the sword begins to glow with a faint blue aura. Seeing this, Julian assumes it's a success. But then, a system window appears, stating that the Moonlight Sword is incomplete. Julian realizes that although the sword has materialized, its form is weak. At that moment, our boy notices the faint image of a crescent moon embedded within the blade. Julian, though slightly disappointed, is relieved to see that at the very least, the moon has dawned on the first day. The next morning, Julian stood in the academy's training yard. He exhaled slowly, widened his stance, and reached for the Moonlight Sword again. He didn't hesitate. With a sharp motion, he unsheathed the blade, and in one fluid swing, cut down 3 training dummies at once. A faint glow shimmered along the blade's edge. Our boy thinks to himself that at least he has reached the skill level of a knight. Now, Julian just needs to complete the Moonlight Sword. However, our boy's knowledge of the game is gradually fading. Julian needs someone who knows him, someone he would trust enough to ask for advice. At that moment, a maid enters and informs our boy that he has a guest. Hearing this, Julian thinks the timing couldn't be better. Perhaps it's someone who is a friend of his. But then we see that the guest is Lazarus. Julian calls out Lazarus's name aloud, and upon hearing it, Lazarus lights up with joy, delighted that Julius still remembers his name. Is it because of what happened yesterday? Razlik grinned. You talk like I'm the type to forget someone who yells at a whole crowd. Julian crossed his arms. What are you doing here, Razlik? Lazarus states that he received an order from the commander to confirm the results of the entrance exam conducted by Julian at Veil Academy yesterday. Our boy responds by asking if Lazarus didn't already see the results himself. Lazarus explains that receiving the results directly from the interviewer and delivering them is part of the official procedure. Hearing this, our boy thinks to himself that the shut-eye organization is pretty inefficient. Then, our boy turns around and states that Lazarus should report the results. 0 candidates passed the entrance exam. Upon hearing this, Lazarus nods and replies that he understands and will inform the commander. Just as Lazarus is about to leave, our boy stops him and, with a serious expression, tells Lazarus to let Julian deliver the results personally. Lazarus is shocked to hear this. Julian further tells Lazarus to let's go to his carriage together, as Julian will give Lazarus a ride. Lazarus is stunned to hear this. Scared, Lazarus inquires, did he make a mistake? This must be because of yesterday, right? Julian tells Lazarus no, it's nothing. Our boy thinks to himself that he is just being considerate because he thought Lazarus might feel uncomfortable going back alone. But since it have come to this, our boy wonders should he go for Lazarus' advice. But our boy thinks that the Shut-Eyes commander sure knows Julian very well, and Julian will make it so that the Cryfart family can never scheme anything when Shut-Eyes is related by putting in a word. Inside a grand, golden building, its walls shimmering with light and marble, suddenly, the heavy door to the commander's office burst open. A staff member came rushing in, face pale, panic in his eyes. Commander, we have a problem. The man seated behind the polished desk didn't even look up right away. He let out an annoyed sigh. What is it this time? He says that Julian Cryhart has come over to meet him. The commander raised his eyebrows after hearing the name of Julian. In the Adderton Imperial Palace, we see Julian smiling. The main setting of the game, Rosinda Continent, is ruled by 3 powerful nations. Among them, the strongest nation is the Adderton Empire where Julian is currently. After the Demon King Barbados was sealed, The ruined nations were swiftly annexed through a powerful monarchy, making it an absolute superpower. And it proves that power is none other than the magnificent imperial palace. Our boy loved this place when he used to play the game. Razlet wonders why he is smiling. It seems so scary to him. He wonders that normally, Julian even visits someone in person directly or sends a servant. But now he has arrived to visit the commander of Shut-Eye directly with the apprentice like him, which really seemed odd to him. All the other people surrounding them also find it really odd that Julian has come over to meet the commander of Shut-Eye. People were whispering things like if he was injured, then still why he came, or maybe his memory loss was just a rumor. Razlet felt like he was about to faint. Julian says that he loved the scenery of the Imperial Palace. Razlet agreed with him. The scene shifted to the first gate, Jyojkian Gate, which is open to everyone. Razlet wonders why Julian is saying all this stuff, because this is a known fact about Shut-Eyes. He wonders what if all of this is part of a test. He looks at Julian and wonders that he is giving him a condescending expression, which means that a lowly apprentice like me needs to take another test. If he doesn't guide him properly, he might end up in his list of failures. He felt like this game is larger than it seems. Our boy asks Razlet if he's doing well. He replies by saying that he isn't sick at all as good health is an extremely important thing for the Shut-Eyes. As they arrived at the place, Julian got super happy. Razlet asks him if he passed the test or not. Julian got confused. Razlet asks that wasn't this all part of the test for him. Julian asks why he would be testing him. Razlet gets teary eyes, more like the tears of joy, and says that it means that he has become a fully qualified member of the Closed Eyes. Our boy wonders why Razlet is asking such questions. Razlet thanks him and leaves him. Julian kept wondering what got into him and why he was so weird. One of the guards calls him and says that Commander Ordwin has announced that he wants him in. Julian gets excited to meet him. Commander Ordwin is a sole heir of Balladur family. His strength and leadership were enough to secure the crucial position of commander. He is a Closed Eye member who follows the imperial family and can only be unified and led by him. Julian wonders what kind of charisma he might have. He gets a little nervous. Getting close to the door, he loudly says, "Commander, I'm coming in." The commander allowed him to come in. Then we saw a lady with long hair sitting on a seat. She is Commander Ordwin. She says, "Julian, come in. It's been a while." She asks him if he's all right as she has heard about his injury. Julian gets scared for a moment as he didn't know that she's the commander of Shut-Eyes. He remembers that he was told that she's small, but never thought that they mean this much small, especially because she looked more like a woman than a girl. She says that he would say that she's small like she read his mind, but he denied the allegations. She orders him to report his injury. He wonders how to explain it as Commander Ordwin isn't someone who takes things lightly, and if he messed something up, he might get suspended. Our boy wonders that even the real Julian would have shown respect to Commander Ordwin, so he should too. So he thanks for her concern and says that this injury wasn't minor at all, but it is also not enough to hinder his loyalty to the imperial family. Commander Ordwin gets shocked for a moment as she didn't expect that he would talk in such a polite manner. Commander Ordwin Balladur leans toward Julian, telling him that this feels very unfamiliar. Julian realizes that Ordwin is suspecting him, and he internally panics, wondering what the original Julian might have done to his superior. Deciding to act like a proper villain, Julian grabs Ordwin's staff and asks if there is any problem. This annoys Ordwin slightly, but she turns to move back, saying that it's quite unusual for Gamma's eyes to come to headquarters. She adds that even if he did come, he would normally just finish his report and leave without saying anything. Sitting down in her chair, she remarks that Julian has suddenly become diligent. Deep down, Julian thinks that the original Julian must have at least known how to distinguish between public and private matters in Closed Eyes, but he realizes he underestimated him. Stepping closer, Julian mentions that he thought Ordwin took a long break from work because of her injury and states that he came personally to report about that as well. However, Ordwin doubts his statement, so Julian decides to boldly push forward just like the original Julian would have. As a result, he asks whether she is even going to control who enters the office. Ordwin frowns, thinking that he's rebelling right after returning. Then she says she's heard that his head hasn't been working properly since the injury, but to her, he seems quite well. Julian grows furious at her words, thinking that she isn't just any ordinary person to speak to him like that. Next, Ordwin asks if there was anyone useful in the recruitment test. Julian says there wasn't, and Ordwin admits she expected that. She points out that Julian is the disciple of the sword saint Heidenreich, so average skills must look laughable to him. Still, she presses him to say whether there were at least a few skilled enough to take as apprentices. With a straight face, Julian gives her the same answer. Holding the document, Ordwin asks if he didn't select even one candidate, and Julian calmly confirms. With an irritated expression, Ordwin asks why, but he remains silent. She repeats her question and then yells, demanding to know if he's lost his mind. She reminds him that Closed Eyes is short on manpower and they need to fill ranks. Even one more person would help. Julian counters that they can't just accept people randomly because of a shortage. He firmly states that all the applicants this time were unfit for Closed Eyes. Ordwin protests, saying some might have been useful if he had taken them as apprentices to test them. But Julian mentions that they didn't even qualify for apprentice positions, though internally he admits he simply avoided the sparring. Annoyed, Ordwin calls the entire matter pointless and orders him to get out of her sight immediately. Julian softly laughs and says he has a proposal. Ordwin, curious to hear what nonsense he'll say now, watches as Julian takes an envelope from his coat and places it on her desk. He mentions that he's identified and organized the problems with the recruitment test through sparring. Ordwin curiously opens and reads the document, while Julian explains that all the candidates lacked a sense of alertness about Closed Eyes. Ordwin calmly agrees that it's necessary to understand what kind of organization one is joining before applying. As she continues reading, she hopes this isn't something trivial. Suddenly, she notices the line stating that if one applies for the recruitment test, Closed Eyes won't be responsible for any accidents that occur. She assumes this means Julian intends to spar with lethal intent and asks if that's true. Julian only gives a short laugh. Hearing no answer, Ordwin believes she's right. She notes that Julian holds a high position in Closed Eyes, second only to her. She reflects that he's never interfered with internal regulations before. After thinking for a while, she asks if this is the reason he didn't select anyone, because he was afraid someone might get hurt. Julian smiles and confirms, saying that those chosen through flawed tests are completely useless. He reminds her that they are a royal-affiliated organization and that tarnishing the royal name is unforgivable. Ordwin instantly replies that she understands. She shakes her head, saying that when it comes to the royal family, he becomes so talkative. She agrees to submit the report to the council, but doesn't promise it will be approved. Julian thanks her and turns to leave, but Ordwin suddenly tells him to wait. She mentions that a letter from the royal secretariat has arrived at his office. Julian smiles, acknowledges her, and leaves. Afterward, Ordwin grows worried, thinking about his statement that Closed Eyes won't be responsible for accidents. She realizes this means that even if a candidate dies during the test, it would be forgiven under royal protection. However, that won't change the nature of the recruitment test. She notes that from the start, only fallen nobles and politically neutral commoners are allowed to apply to Closed Eyes, as those without power are easier to silence, and Julian must know that as well. Thinking deeper, she concludes that he made this proposal because he must have realized the Elders' Council and the Torse family tampered with the test. She assumes this is Julian's way of striking back, signaling that he's seen through their schemes and won't let it go easily again. She believes Julian is making a bold move to strike the Elders' Council directly. Calling one of her servants, she orders him to deliver Julian's proposal to the council, and the servant obeys. Ordwin sighs, recalling that before Julian's injury, he barely obeyed royal commands. He was an emotionless beast who held no grudges against his superiors. Now, she wonders if he's broken free and begun to form his own sense of self. Frowning uneasily, she believes he'll be a headache, but decides to keep an eye on him nonetheless. Now, Julian stands right in front of his office door. Sherhu is stunned to have made it all the way to Julian's office in the Closed Eyes headquarters. He notes that normally, Closed Eyes doesn't provide private offices since there's no need for members to be on standby. He grows curious about what kind of private rooms such an organization could possibly offer. However, upon entering, he finds expensive clothes, creepy decorations, and luxury items that have nothing to do with work. Sherhu admits that it's even worse than Julian's house. The items in the office look ridiculously expensive, and he really can't bring himself to like Julian because he has the worst taste. While walking through the office, Sherhu steps on something again. He complains to Julian, saying that if he isn't going to take care of things, then why did he buy them in the first place? Suddenly, someone knocks on the door, and Julian grants permission to enter. It's Lazarus, who greets Julian and mentions that he's come to deliver a letter from the imperial family. Meanwhile, Julian thinks to himself that he sees Lazarus every single day. Lazarus hands him an envelope, and as Julian holds it, he realizes that this must be the letter Ordwin mentioned earlier. When Lazarus excuses himself to leave, Julian immediately stops him. He orders Lazarus to load the sculptures onto the carriage he used to come here and adds that they shouldn't be heavy. Lazarus freezes, asking if Julian really means for him to carry all of this. Julian confirms it with a smile. Lazarus begins to sweat, thinking he can't believe he's been given work again, but then quickly beams, thinking he won't be a trainee much longer. He firmly acknowledges the order and says he'll move everything right away. Julian, observing him, thinks that Lazarus is making that weird face again. Lazarus happily carries an item, but as he moves forward, he steps on something and falls flat on the floor. Julian sighs, thinking Lazarus is quite noisy, and starts to say that he's going to throw them out, but Lazarus apologizes in fear. Julian pats his shoulder, telling him he doesn't need to be so nervous, and thinks he should try calming him down with a joke. However, with a serious face, Julian says that cleaning up would become a problem if he dies here, and then suggests he start moving the items. Lazarus hurriedly acknowledges, while Shirhu quietly thinks to himself that Lazarus is only scared because he's currently in Julian's body, and that's to be expected. Shirhu decides to read the letter. He notes that the seal on it belongs to the imperial family, just like in the game. As he starts reading, he realizes the letter is addressed to him. He's surprised to see that he can now read the Empire's language. The letter basically says that if he has recovered, he should return to work. He scoffs, thinking they're treating him like a slave. They just sugar-coated the order. Still, he isn't complaining. He believes getting field experience is important right now, especially since he hasn't found any clues about the Moonlight Sword yet. The letter states that his mission is the restoration of a resonance stone. Shirhu explains to himself that in the game Kill the Demon King starting now, there exist monsters known as demons. After the demon god Barbados died, his remains either parasitized living beings or manifested into physical forms. Those became known as demons in this world. These demons began attacking humanity, and the items used to eliminate them are called resonance stones. The stones are considered the great legacy of ancient mages. Shirhu wonders how they were able to create such stones using mana. Since he isn't a mage, he realizes his role is to protect the mage responsible for restoring the stone. Although he sees no reason to refuse the mission, he knows there's a risk involved in fighting demons. He believes that if he succeeds in this mission, the recent suspicions and rumors about Julian will fade. However, he's curious to know who the mage he'll be protecting is. Handling a resonance stone requires skilled magic users, so he hopes it's someone competent. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Eileen stretches at the Adrathan Imperial Palace. She complains that even after becoming a professor, she still has to write a thesis. She wonders if this is what a mage's life is, constantly proving oneself, but admits that the imperial family is extremely demanding. Suddenly, someone taps her shoulder from behind. When she turns, she sees Diana, who asks what she's doing there. Eileen greets her warmly and asks how she's been. Diana remarks that Eileen has become quite busy as the youngest professor. It's hard to even see her these days. Eileen blushes, telling her she doesn't need to flatter her like that. Diana then asks if Eileen has some free time, as she wants to take her to a tea party. Eileen's face turns pale as she hurriedly says she doesn't have time. She needs to work on her thesis. Diana laughs and comments that Eileen is still as diligent as she was during her student days. Eileen sulks a little, but Diana then points toward a carriage, asking if that's Senior Julian's carriage. When Eileen looks, she realizes Diana is right. She sees the crest on the carriage, which is only used by collateral members of the Cryfart family, meaning it's Julian's carriage. Diana comments that he was on the verge of death before, and now he's back again. Eileen tries to act indifferent, but Diana smirks and teases her, asking if she still has feelings for Julian. Eileen quickly denies it, saying she doesn't know what Diana is talking about. Her body trembles with embarrassment when Diana brings up an old memory. How Eileen once confessed her love to Julian under the king cherry tree on the hill behind the academy after hearing a rumor back in college. Eileen yells in frustration and suggests they both go to the tea party together instead. Diana chuckles, reminding her that she just said she was busy. Eileen awkwardly fake laughs, saying she's actually free now. Diana smiles and tells her that back in college, everyone had a crush on Julian. Eileen feels grateful for her words and admits that Diana is right. She also reflects that Julian was a completely different man back then. He changed after joining Closed Eyes and returning from the Northern Front. Diana suggests that Eileen should greet him, but Eileen firmly says she doesn't like him anymore and doesn't want to face him for a while. When Diana asks why, Eileen shows her an envelope, explaining that she won't be staying in the palace for a while. Diana looks amazed, wondering if it's from the imperial family. Eileen confirms, saying that they've given him a mission, the restoration of a resonant stone. Many escort knights are stationed in position, and one of them wonders if someone important is arriving. Another confirms, saying that the Blue Lion Knights are accompanying the Closed Eyes on this mission. They've even heard that Julian himself is personally joining them. The first knight is shocked. He's heard rumors that Julian had lost his memories. The other knight agreed. They both conclude that assigning this mission was the right decision, as public opinion is now turning in their favor. Two knights approach Julian and thank him for accepting the mission. One introduces himself as Fern, while the other introduces himself as Heinrich. Julian praises their efforts and instructs them to safely escort the mages to Jelen. Internally, Shirhu feels uneasy at the thought of encountering demons during the mission. The two knights then suggest that Julian travel by carriage and leave the escorting duties to the Blue Lion Knights. However, Shirhu quickly realizes that this isn't for Julian's convenience. He recalls that the Blue Lion Knights are an imperial regular unit, and unlike the Closed Eyes, most regular knights consist of nobles. He concludes that they simply don't want someone from a branch family to take the lead over nobles. Frustrated, he complains inwardly that in novels, people who end up in another world live good lives, but here he's stuck in the body of a villain. Still, he admits that traveling by carriage sounds more comfortable, so he agrees to their suggestion. The knight sighs in relief. Heinrich acknowledges the decision and says he'll inform Eileen once she arrives. Julian, however, coldly asks who she is. After a short while, Eileen finally arrives and greets everyone warmly. She comments on how nice the weather is today and introduces herself as the mage in charge of the resonant stone restoration. When her eyes meet Julian's, both of them freeze on the spot. Julian immediately tells the knights to forget what he said earlier about taking the carriage. Meanwhile, Eileen blushes and freezes as well, wondering what Julian is doing there, and whether he has been deliberately avoiding her. Julian, on the other hand, thinks of Eileen as a wild card. It makes him uncomfortable not knowing what's going on in her mind. The guards begin to panic, confused as to why Julian suddenly changed his decision. Fern grits his teeth, wondering if Julian has figured out his plan to place him in the rear so he could oversee the mission discreetly. Julian moves ahead on his horse while Fern internally admits that Julian truly seems like someone who has survived the chaos of the imperial court while maintaining neutrality. Still, Fern furiously thinks that Julian, being from a collateral branch, looks down on other nobles just because he has the royal family's acknowledgement, but thinks no one told him he'd be escorting Eileen of all people. Inside the carriage, Eileen feels just as uncomfortable. In this tense atmosphere, Shirhu resolves to finish the mission as quickly as possible so that he'll never have to cross paths with Eileen again. He urges his horse forward and leads the way. After a long journey, they arrive at Jelen. Observing the area, Shirhu thinks it's a small and quiet place, while Fern and Heinrich keep a close eye on him. Shirhu notices there's no welcoming party, even though they've come all the way from the capital. Suddenly, a man wearing a waistcoat and carrying a wooden box filled with equipment approaches Julian, asking if they've come from the capital. Julian confirms it, and the man thanks them for traveling such a long way. He introduces himself and offers to guide them to where the resonant stone is located. Once they arrive at their destination, Eileen instructs the knights to handle the resonant stone box and the mana conduit box separately. She insists on handling one box herself. The waistcoat man then asks if she'd like to inspect the damaged area, and she nods. A few minutes later, Eileen stands before a massive resonant stone, damaged deeply on one side. She examines it carefully and says, with concern, that it's difficult to repair. It will require a partial replacement. The waistcoat man looks worried, but Eileen reassures him, explaining that the barrier will temporarily disappear during the repair, though it won't take long. The man nods, putting his faith in her ability. Eileen places her hand on the stone and completes the preparation. Now, She needs to inform Julian that the barrier will be down during the process. She flushes slightly, muttering that she doesn't want to see his face, but quickly reminds herself that she's a professional now, a professor, and must focus on her work. Later, she calls out to Julian, but he freezes the instant he hears her voice. Before she can say anything, he walks away, completely ignoring her. Eileen is stunned that he's avoiding her so blatantly. She reaches out her hand, asking him to wait and listen. Now it's clear to her, he has been avoiding her. She wonders why. Could it be because he knows she still cares? Furious, Eileen grabs his arm, reminding herself that they're on official duty, and decides to confront him directly. She finally asks why he's avoiding her. Julian pulls his arm free and replies that she's been persistently following him. Eileen blushes and freezes, thinking he's unbelievably bold and annoyingly confident for saying something like that with a straight face. She yells that this isn't what's important, but Julian smirks and asks what is important, teasingly calling her Miss Stalker. Eileen gets angry, shouting that she's been holding back this whole time. But before she can continue, both of them suddenly sense something terrifying, a sinister presence approaching fast. The air grows heavy, and they realize the feeling is coming from demons. Eileen and Julian both freeze in fear as the demonic aura intensifies. Eileen shouts that she was trying to tell him the barrier was down and that demons could appear, but he was too busy avoiding her to listen. At that moment, Heinrich screams as he's struck by a demon and hurled against a wall. Shirhu turns toward the creature, his face drenched in sweat, and realizes with horror that it's a Type 2 demon. Shirhu becomes terrified at the sudden appearance of a two-horned demon. He admits that this is an unexpected turn of events. Suddenly, Eileen rushes toward Julian, asking about the situation, but Julian immediately tells her to stop because it's dangerous. The demon lets out a deafening roar, and Eileen freezes in fear at its overwhelming presence. She frantically wonders what she should do. She has no combat spells and can't use the resonance stone in this situation. The Type 2 demon roars again, summoning its underlings to attack. When one of them lunges at Eileen, Julian moves forward and strikes it down in an instant. He tells her to focus and not to be so shaken, saying that losing composure like this is disgraceful. He reminds her that they should each do their respective duties. Eileen should repair the resonance stone, and he will protect her. Eileen blushes in shock, her heart racing, while Julian teasingly asks if she's so scared that she's forgotten her job. Snapping out of it, she quickly runs toward the stone, shouting that the repair will take about 7 minutes. Before focusing on her task, Eileen calls out to Julian, telling him not to get hurt since she doesn't have any healing spells. Julian smirks and replies confidently that it would take much more than that to injure him. But deep down, Shirhu admits that he's terrified. He never expected his first real battle to be against a two-horned demon. Still, he refuses to run. With so many people watching, he can't afford to look weak. He doesn't want any new rumors to start or anyone to suspect him further. He thinks to himself that if this were the real Julian, handling a demon like this would have been effortless. Suddenly, Fern charges forward, leading his men with pride, shouting that the Blue Lion Knights will eliminate the two-horned demon. They swing their swords in unison, striking the demon and believing they can handle it through sheer force. Fern turns toward Julian with a mocking grin, asking if he's afraid of the creature. But then he notices Julian smiling. Shirhu reminds himself that right now, he is Julian. And in a situation like this, the real Julian would no doubt be enjoying it. Channeling that mindset, Shirhu activates his innate swordsman skill and charges at the demon. His strike lands, and he takes down the demon, shocking Fern and the knights. They stare in disbelief at the heavy damage Julian inflicted with a single strike. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, Shirhu can't help but grin. He's actually enjoying this. He leaps again, striking the demon a second time. However, before he can follow through, the demon glares directly at him with glowing eyes, and Shirhu instantly senses danger. The demon strikes him with brutal force, sending him flying. Thinking that he can barely breathe from the pain, gritting his teeth, he steadies himself, but the demon attacks again, slamming him into the ground with devastating strength. The knights stand frozen in disbelief. Julian, the infamous prodigy, was struck down. Fern laughs arrogantly, saying that a two-horned demon can't be taken down by one man alone. He begins to think this is his chance to take command and claim the victory for himself. Then, out of the smoke, a bright blue light flickers. The knight's eyes widen as Julian emerges, standing tall and unshaken, his sword glowing with a radiant blue aura. Fern and the others are stunned when they recognize it. It's the Moonlight Sword. Shirhu steps forward, a confident smile forming on his face as he activates his incomplete Moonlight Sword, ready to face the two-horned demon once more. The knights recognize the legendary Moonlight Sword, a weapon they had only heard about in rumors. Meanwhile, Shirhu thinks that even if this version isn't a quarter as powerful as the real Moonlight Sword, it's still more than enough as a handicap. He approaches the demon with the glowing blade in hand. The demon roars furiously, but Shirhu remains focused, calmly remarking that although the demon's movements are clumsy, its attacks are sharp, and he can see them clearly, because he is Julian now. He decides to test his new ability and activates the skill trait, Insight. When the demon swings at him again, Shirhu dodges every blow effortlessly, analyzing the creature's patterns and movements. The knights watch in awe as he avoids each attack with precision, while Fern stands frozen, terror and admiration mixing in his eyes. He finally admits aloud that this is truly Julian of the closed eyes. On the other hand, Eileen successfully completes the repair on the damaged stone and quickly shouts that the barrier will reactivate soon. The resonance stones rise into the air once more, glowing brightly and confusing the demon. Seizing the moment, Shirhu charges forward, declaring that the demon made a foolish decision. The demon freezes in fear just before Shirhu delivers a devastating strike. Eileen gasps in shock, and the knights are left speechless as the two-horned demon is completely destroyed. Julian slides his sword gracefully back into its scabbard. As the knights begin murmuring among themselves, Julian covers his face with one hand, thinking to himself in disbelief that it actually worked. As he walks past the knights, all of them tremble in fear, overwhelmed by his power. Feeling the tense atmosphere, Shirhu reflects that Julian truly is a villain, and that it's natural for people to fear such overwhelming strength. Suddenly, one of the knights steps forward, calling out to Julian. He grabs Julian's hand and thanks him sincerely, leaving Shirhu momentarily confused. The knight explains that they all thought they were going to die, and soon the rest of the knights cheer for Julian in gratitude, something Shirhu hadn't expected at all. Next, Fern approaches Julian and praises him for his incredible work. Julian simply tells him to submit the report on his behalf, admitting that he's not used to that kind of bureaucratic duty. Fern nods respectfully and accepts the task. As Julian leaves, Fern watches him go, thinking that Julian is truly different, on an entirely new level compared to other nobles. He even believes Julian might not be human, given how calm he remains after defeating a two-horned demon, and he means that in the most astonishing way possible. After a while, Shirhu reaches the riverbank and sits down on the grassy ground. He exhales deeply, murmuring that it was incredibly dangerous. His body starts trembling from exhaustion after everything he's been through. He realizes that real battles are far more brutal than he had imagined. He felt hatred, fear, and despair radiating from the demon firsthand. Looking at his shaking hands, he remembers the sensation of defeating a demon and wonders if the real Julian always treated such deadly moments so casually. The thought unsettles him, as he fears he's slowly becoming more like Julian himself. Gazing at his reflection in the water, he wonders if the body's nature can truly change the mind. He frowns, questioning how far Julian's power can go. Immediately, he opens his status window, noting that the ability unlocked this time is a fusion of his own knowledge and Julian's combat experience. He studies the details of his new skill, trait, Insight. With it, he can easily identify an opponent's weak points, sense their emotions, and deal additional damage to enemies who feel fear toward him. He concludes that this combination has evolved into a trait that exposes weakness, something that can help him easily dispel surrounding suspicion about himself. Now, the only issue left is the incomplete Moonlight Sword. Drawing it out, he examines the blade closely and notices a groove he carved into it earlier. To activate the Moonlight Sword, he had to pour a tremendous amount of mana into it. He notes that both its power and stability still fall short of a fully completed Moonlight Sword. As he cleans the blade, he realizes that everything about it comes down to stability. A faint smile forms on his lips as a new idea crosses his mind. He's thought of the perfect way to fix it. Meanwhile, at the Noble Elders' Council, Haran stands before several cloaked figures. The leader orders him to sit, and he does so, trembling in fear. The leader then asks whether Julian has discovered their plan. Haran finally nods and admits that it appears so. The leader sighs and says he already knew that Haran's incompetence would eventually cause trouble. He adds coldly that if Haran were not from the house of Hyun, his fate would be far worse. Trembling, Haran bows deeply and apologizes to the leader, Lord Oren. Moments later, another member steps forward and informs Lord Oren that Closed Eyes has been acting strangely. They've submitted a new proposal to the Imperial Secretariat. The member explains that the proposal states that from now on, when Closed Eyes conducts its recruitment tests, the instructors will not be held responsible for any accidents. It also declares that even if there are casualties, the instructors shall be considered innocent under the name of the Empire. Lord Oren begins to sweat, while another council member slams his hand on the table, exclaiming that this proposal clearly reflects Julian's will. The other members agree and mock Julian for his arrogance. Then, one of them suddenly speaks up, suggesting that this might actually be an opportunity. Lord Oren looks confused and asks what Lord Aiden means by that. Aiden explains that until now, Julian has always followed Imperial orders without question, but if he's now trying to act independently, he could become a dangerous variable. However, Aiden continues that very unpredictability could make him more useful than when they exiled him to the Northern Front. He proposes that rather than opposing Julian immediately, they should observe him for the time being. Another member objects, saying that Aiden is basically suggesting they let Julian do whatever he wants. Aiden smirks, nodding confidently, and replies that sometimes the best results come from simply waiting. Meanwhile, Shirhu finally gets to rest in his room after several exhausting days on the mission. He feels completely drained, having poured so much mana into battle. Still, the sight of his redecorated room gives him a sense of peace. He looks around and murmurs that orchids bring calm even to the terrifying body of Julian. His eyes then move to a chest nearby, and he smiles faintly, thinking he gained more than he expected from this mission. Not only did he perform well enough to silence the negative rumors about him, but he also managed to acquire a rare gem that could help him complete the Moonlight Sword. The idea had come to him when he first saw the Resonant Stone. He recalls that in this world, ruled by the current Demon King, every material holds mana. The gems produced within the Empire have the highest mana conductivity and capacity, which is why Resonant Stones are so refined. Taking inspiration from the Resonant Stone's ability to channel mana, Shirhu begins to think about the connection between himself and his sword. He wonders if there might be a gem capable of serving as a mana conduit. It would need to resonate perfectly with his own mana, and finding such a gem would be no easy task. A sudden knock interrupts his thoughts. Assuming it's time for a meal, he tells the person to enter. Lazarus walks in and greets him respectfully. Shirhu thinks to himself that this guy shows up far too often. Lazarus delivers a message from Ordwin, informing Julian that he must report to the Imperial Secretariat in person regarding the mission. Julian raises an eyebrow and asks if a personal report is really necessary. Lazarus confirms that it is. With a sigh, Julian rises from his seat and instructs Lazarus to return the gems to their original place, regretting that he'll have to postpone completing the Moonlight Sword. As he prepares to leave, he wonders if the Imperial Secretariat is truly that curious about his condition to summon him personally. Just as he's about to step out, Lazarus calls after him. Julian stops and asks if there's anything else. Lazarus hesitantly asks what he should do with the damaged gems, and Julian casually replies that he should throw them away. Lazarus nods, but internally laments that such fine materials are being discarded so carelessly. When Julian arrives at the Imperial Secretariat, he immediately notes how much more luxurious the building is compared to Closed Eyes headquarters. Approaching the reception desk, he introduces himself and says he's there to meet Lord Siden Orvian of the Secretariat. The receptionist informs him that Lord Orvian is currently in a meeting with another guest who arrived just before him, and asks Julian to wait in the lounge. Shirhu assumes the guest must be someone of higher status than Julian. As he enters the lounge, he looks around and thinks to himself that this place wasn't even featured in the game. The lavish interior impresses him. Then, unexpectedly, he notices a sword resting on a sofa. Curious, he picks it up, wondering why such a weapon is lying around in such a refined place. Examining it closely, he sees that although the sword looks rough and unpolished, it exudes a powerful aura. proof that its wielder possesses great skill. As he studies it further, he notices an inscription engraved on the scabbard. Suddenly, a cold voice from behind orders him to step away from the sword and addresses him as a trespasser. Shirhu instantly recognizes the voice even without turning around. The woman reminds him sharply that the sword was a gift from their master. Turning, Shirhu sees her clearly, the noble daughter of one of the Empire's most prestigious knightly families, House Rondabelle. He immediately recalls who she is, one of Heidenreich's top disciples, a powerful knight in her own right. In the game, he remembers, this woman met her end at Julian's hands. Her name is Lynn Rondabelle, and as Shirhu studies her closely, he begins to think that she might just be the key to escaping this world. Shirhu remembers that Lynn is also one of Hayden's disciples, and that she's talented enough to one day surpass even Julian. She possesses both beauty and skill, and her elegance combined with strength made her a fan favorite in the game. Even though Shirhu reminds himself that he is Julian, not Hayden, Lynn stares at him coldly. She asks sharply what he was trying to do with her teacher's sword. He calmly replies that he was just looking at it. Then, thinking he might be able to draw some information from her, he decides to taunt her a little. With a smirk, he comments that he didn't expect her to be the type to leave her sword lying around so carelessly. Lynn narrows her eyes and asks if he can't even recognize the sword. She adds that her teacher is not someone who would thoughtlessly carry his blade around the imperial palace. Shirhu smiles to himself. She took the bait. He expected as much. She's always been a principled and upright person. Then he says out loud that her teacher must be the sword saint Hayden Reich, who likely arrived here before him as a guest. Lynn frowns and asks what that has to do with him. Shirhu lets out a short laugh, replying that he's just curious since Hayden used to be his teacher too. Meanwhile, he thinks to himself that he needs to test how much hatred Lynn truly feels toward Julian. Lynn grips the sword tightly, trembling with anger, and demands how he dares to say something like that. Her face turns red with fury, and Shirhu senses a strong wave of emotion radiating from her, exactly as he expected. He admits internally that he provoked her on purpose and even feels the urge to apologize on Julian's behalf. But before he can say anything, the door suddenly opens. An attendant steps in, informing Lynn that she's been summoned to the secretary's office. Lynn turns to leave, giving Julian a curt farewell and coldly saying that she hopes they never see each other again. Then the attendant adds that Julian has also been called. Both Lynn and Shirhu freeze for a moment. Quickly regaining his composure, Shirhu decides to act cool like Julian would. With a faint smirk, he tells Lynn not to be so cold toward him, reminding her that they share the same teacher. Lynn glances back at him with visible embarrassment but remains silent. Shirhu thinks to himself that soon he'll be meeting that very teacher, the legendary sword saint Hayden Reich. Lynn glares at him one last time and warns him not to ever mention her teacher's name again. Half excited and half nervous, Shirhu can hardly contain his anticipation. He's about to meet his favorite character from the game, but this time, while trapped inside the body of the man who once betrayed that very person. At the Imperial Secretary's office, the clerk greets both Lynn and Julian respectfully. He mentions that he's heard rumors that Julian single-handedly defeated a two-horned demon. Julian gives a faint laugh and brushes it off casually, saying it was merely a good warm-up. Lynn rolls her eyes and asks where her teacher is. Shirhu, meanwhile, quietly admits to himself that he's also eager to meet Hayden. However, the clerk informs Lynn that Hayden has already left after assigning her a new mission. Then he turns to Julian and says that Hayden specifically requested that Julian accompany her. Lynn immediately protests, saying she refuses to work with this traitor. The clerk, however, explains that Hayden insisted someone from the Empire accompany her, and since Julian happens to be present, he's the most suitable choice. Shirhu begins to sweat inwardly, wondering what Hayden might have been thinking to pair them together, while Lynn trembles in anger beside him. The clerk laughs softly and hands them a document, stating that their mission is to investigate the capital slums. Shirhu decides to keep up his act as Julian since he has no better option. With a mocking tone, he scoffs at the idea of investigating the slums. The clerk calmly explains that according to reports, demons have been sighted there, and the people living in the slums are against direct involvement from the imperial family. That, he says, is precisely why this mission is perfect for Julian and Lynn. Both are affiliated with the imperial family, but not directly a part of it, since Julian belongs to Closed Eyes and Lynn to the Knight Academy. Shirhu recalls that the slums are home to the remnants of nations that were forcibly annexed by the Empire. The people there hail from different lands and are forbidden from entering imperial territory. Naturally, they harbor deep resentment toward the imperial family. That's why Closed Eyes, known for its neutrality, is being sent in their stead. He thinks further that if Lin manages to outperform him during this mission, it could pave her way to becoming the next Sword Saint. Internally, he admits that working alongside her isn't ideal for him, but he can't refuse the order. Finally, Julian acknowledges the order and accepts the mission without complaint. Lin, however, yells that she refuses, and Shirhu can't help but feel a twinge of envy toward her for being able to reject something he has no choice but to obey. The clerk calmly explains to Lin that this mission was personally assigned to her by her teacher, the Sword Saint Hayden Reich. Hearing this, Julian immediately asks if she intends to go against her teacher's will. After taking a moment to think, Lin reluctantly agrees to accept the mission. Shirhu predicts that she'll likely keep a close eye on the traitor Julian throughout their journey, but unfortunately, he doesn't yet have the strength to resist her scrutiny. He sighs inwardly, wishing he had a gem that resonated perfectly with his mana. Then, suddenly, his eyes catch something. Lin is wearing a gemstone pendant around her neck. He feels a strange energy radiating from it and immediately asks her about it. Lin looks startled but replies that it's a moonstone. Unexpectedly, the moonstone begins to glow softly, reacting to Julian's presence. Lin's eyes widen as she demands to know what his intentions are, noting that the stone lit up on its own. Julian gives a small laugh and casually says it just looks nice. However, internally, he realizes that even for a brief moment, the moonstone resonated with his mana and absorbed it. He never expected to find an answer this easily and decides right then that he must somehow obtain this gemstone. Later, Julian visits a gemstone shop, where the shopkeeper greets him warmly and asks what he's looking for. Removing his cloak, Julian explains that he needs a gemstone capable of resonating with his mana and specifically asks if they have any moonstones. The clerk repeats the word thoughtfully before shaking his head. He explains that their shop doesn't carry moonstones, and it's likely the same for every other shop as well. There's almost no demand for them except among collectors. The clerk explains nervously. They're extremely difficult to mine, so they're not kept in stock. Shirhu frowns, thinking to himself that this is bad. He desperately needs a moonstone to complete his moonlight sword before his mission with Lin. His expression darkens, and he coldly demands, "Are you telling me you can't get any moonstones?" The clerk freezes in terror, realizing he's speaking to Julian, not just any customer. Panicking, he quickly changes his tone to save himself. "You misunderstand, my lord. We can get them. It's just that we don't have any at the moment," he stammers. Hearing this, Shirhu feels a bit of relief and leans forward, asking if the clerk can really acquire them soon because he needs them urgently. Trembling, the clerk promises to search the entire country if necessary. Meanwhile, Shirhu worries that Lin might notice the incomplete moonlight sword, so obtaining the moonstones has become even more important. Days pass, and the day of the mission finally arrives, but despite his efforts, he still hasn't managed to get his hands on any. Leaving the gem shop, he wonders bitterly if he didn't threaten the clerk hard enough. When he meets Lin, she looks disappointed to learn that his important business was merely at a jewelry store. Cloaked and calm, Julian laughs softly, telling her that one day she'll understand the beauty of gemstones. Lin rolls her eyes and tells him to follow her, but Julian quickly reminds her that she's heading in the wrong direction. Lin stops and looks at him skeptically, asking what he means. Excited to finally show off his knowledge from the game, Shirhu explains that the slums are a maze of illegally constructed buildings and narrow alleyways, and that no one can rely solely on maps or signs to find their way. Lin scoffs, saying she'll trust the signs rather than follow a traitor like him. Shirhu admits inwardly that she has a point, but he also remembers from the game that the East slums were notoriously difficult to navigate. Holding the map firmly, Lin declares that she won't fall for any of his cheap tricks, accusing him of trying to sabotage her as Hayden's disciple. She firmly states that she's nothing like him and that she'll become the next Sword Saint no matter what. Julian sighs, thinking she's completely misunderstanding the situation. Internally, Shirhu admits that this mission is definitely not going to be easy.